Happy game day, Seattle hockey fans. We are hosting the Montreal Canadiens, our last matchup between Montreal and any Eastern Conference opponent, which means that points will be at a premium the rest of the way, as if they weren't already. And Dave Haxtell spoke to media today, had some very interesting comments. Nothing that you haven't heard, though, here on Locked On Kraken. We'll talk about that and more on today's game day pre-game episode of Locked On Kraken.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are the Seattle Kraken.
Hey, what do you say, Seattle hockey fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you your favorite team every single day. This is a live episode of Locked On Kraken as we get ready for the Seattle Kraken to host the Montreal Canadiens. This will be the penultimate homestand for the Seattle Kraken and the longest one left in the season. The Seattle Kraken will have 2 games at home against Arizona and San Jose next month in early April, and then that's all she wrote. Will the Seattle Kraken be a playoff team? The chances are no. We've talked about that on our last handful of episodes, but there is still plenty to play for, and I think Dave Haxtell did an awesome job really breaking down what all of that means. We're going to talk about that in the second segment of today's show. But as I mentioned, it is a game day, which means we have to get you ready for the game against the Montreal Canadiens. Now, here is the head-to-head, the amazing Seattle Kraken PR team putting this together for you. But you can see that, at least on paper, so to speak, the Seattle Kraken are a more winning team than the Canadiens. The Canadiens sit at 62 points, 25, 32, and 12. Is their overall record. We have 69 points, 28, 28, and 13. The record at home, 14, 15, and 6. Want to improve on that. The Canadiens are 12, 15, and 8 away. I mean, look at these two teams. Their last 10 games, not much to write home about for either side. You have the Seattle Kraken at 2-6-2. The Canadiens at 2-4-4. Nick Suzuki leading the way for Montreal, 64 points. Still Jared McCann for the Seattle Kraken. You can see the penalty kill favors the Seattle Kraken, as does the power play. So here's hoping that special teams will be something that the Seattle Kraken can capitalize on. Now, they haven't always done that very well, but at least on paper, so to speak, they should be able to get it done. A few other things to point out. We saw a lot of people from Kraken Nation, from the media circuit anyway, talking about Vince Dunn returning to practice, but this time in a no-contact red jersey. This is actually, we'd seen him at practice, but he had been practicing normally as far as we could tell, just hadn't returned to gameplay. So Dave didn't actually have much to say about Vince Dunn in his pregame commentary. He actually did give us the starting goaltender. Philip Grubauer will start in net for the Seattle Kraken. But I'll play that clip, as I said, in the second segment. The second stanza. I talked about special teams. The Seattle Kraken have gone 14 of 15 on the penalty kill against the Canadiens since the start of the 21-22 season. That's a 93.3% success rate. That's the best against any opponent. So I do expect the Seattle Kraken to win, so to speak, the special teams battle. However, converting on the power play, is that going to be something that we see from the Seattle Kraken? Well, we just don't know. And a part of that, again, goes to comments that you'll hear from Dave. But that, honestly, we've been talking about on Locked On Kraken for a few episodes, if not a few weeks now. And that being that the Seattle Kraken are not generating high danger chances. And you can have as many power plays as you want, but if you're not finding ways to put yourself in a scoring position, then you're not going to be successful. And again, Dave had some interesting comments really confirming a lot of what we've been talking about on the show. Gripping the stick too tight, maybe looking for looking too much for the perfect shot as opposed to just getting into the high danger areas. But again, we'll hear from Dave on those points. Matty Beniers has been getting a lot of flack, and understandably so. Even on this program, we have talked a lot about Matty Beniers, but he is 54% at the faceoff dot in his last 6 games. So I love to see that improvement. And again, nominal improvements is something that you're going to hear from Dave Haxtell. Focusing on if this is a team that won't make the playoffs, which there's a high chance that that will be the case. What is there to play for? I know I've been talking a lot about tanking. If you listen to the show, if you're a Locked On Kraken OG or everydayer, then you know I hate the notion of tanking. And I don't think we're going to get to it on this live episode, but I had a really thoughtful comment on YouTube that I want to discuss next week, talking about the idea of tanking and players and even coaching staffs buying into it. And I mean, I might be biased, but I happen to agree with the comment. So we'll talk about it. But I've been talking about this all season, as you recall. If his offensive output is negatively impacted because he's getting better at the faceoff dot, well, I have a few things that I would say to that. And I would also say he's young. You can probably see behind me the Rookie of the Year poster. He did win Rookie of the Year, so we know the offense can be there. I do think some of it is that he's being targeted. I saw it really clearly in the Las Vegas game. He's being pushed to the perimeter, so to speak, immediately upon entering the zone, sometimes whether he has the puck or not. But we need to be better at the faceoff. And so if Matty Beniers is getting through the uncomfortable evolution of his game at the NHL level to get better at faceoffs, assuming that we keep him around as we want to, then that's going to be good. And again, I want you to remember that as we talk about Matty Beniers, because again, it's something that Dave had some really insightful things. I thought he was very open and forthcoming with a lot of what he was saying about the Seattle Kraken. So we're going to get to that shortly in just a minute. Just a few other little tidbits that I want to mention, because Riker Evans, we talked about it, bittersweet first goal within, kind of wrapped in a loss, a tough loss, a tough streak for the Seattle Kraken, was his first NHL goal. But he has recorded a point in 3 of the last 4 games he has played. With a goal or an assist today, Evans would have a point in 3 consecutive games for the first time in his career. And similarly to what I said about Matty Beniers, though at a different level, getting the consistency with Riker Evans, even Ty Cartier, we have to get that. We have to establish that. And if the season is indeed lost, these are the things that I want to see the Seattle Kraken buy into. Giving these guys opportunities, giving them more leadership, and helping them to not be afraid to fail. This is the time of the season where I want those guys really leading the charge. Because again, if we're going to be eliminated from the playoffs, and I don't believe we should be tanking, so to speak, you're in this really interesting phase where it's longer than preseason and it's real competition. So you can have these guys really, really playing an integral part in the game, in Seattle Kraken's game plan. And I hope that we see some of that. But we're going to keep an eye on that, because I think it's going to be very interesting, especially given what Dave said to media today, which again, I'll probably be breaking down for the next few episodes. Fam, he spoke for 9 minutes. It took a lot for me to parse down what he said in about 3 minutes just for this live episode because I just thought there were so many nuggets. So needless to say, we're definitely going to talk a little bit more about what Dave Haxtell had to say ahead of this game. And then also, if we see any of what he's talking about pregame implemented tonight and moving forward, that's coming up on today's episode of Locked On Kraken. Thanks as always for making Locked On Kraken a part of your daily destination. If we're meeting for the first time, my name is Erica L. Ayala. I've been your host of Locked On Kraken since the very beginning, taking you to the expansion draft, Frozen 4, Beijing Olympics, where we were on Benir's watch, and so much more. It's an honor and a privilege to be your host from the very beginning, and hopefully you're having as much fun as I am with this one. So I mentioned it, but Dave Haxtell had some really great comments, and I want to play some of them for you now. And we're going to break it down. We'll start here today because it's a game day, and he said some really interesting things. And again, in the next few episodes, I intend to come back to some of what he's saying because I feel like some of what he said today is full circle to, quite honestly, what we've been talking about all season. Here's Dave Haxtell.
Mindset really it can't change from where it was the last couple of nights. Our ability to finish games can improve and has to improve in some critical situations. But our overall game, our work in Vegas, the pace of our game in Arizona, coming on the back-to-back was very good. We did a lot of the things that we wanted to do. We didn't finish the game. We made a mistake in the way we defended a play coming in our zone. But for me, it goes a little bit deeper. If you look at including the disallowed goal against Arizona, those plays are starting with speed coming out of the other zone. So there's another layer that we can provide there before we get to the critical play that's entering our zone. Right now, we're not getting enough areas from inside. If you want to break it right down, it's not about possession. It's not about some of the second opportunities that we're retrieving and turning into more offensive zone possession. It's one or two critical plays inside, and we're not finding those right now. That's a combination of two things. Number one, getting to that spot and being available, and then secondly, having the confidence to make that play to the inside. Over the last week, we've gone through, mentally a challenging stretch because as you look at that spread in the standings, change from the point that we were at coming into games literally 10 days ago, playing well, 7-3-2 coming into that stretch with a real opportunity to close some distance to really push into true meaningful games in the last month. We came up short in those games.
I want to pause there. We are going to get back to Dave because, again, he gave a lot of really good nuggets, but you heard him talk about not getting inside enough and talking about how the last 10 games have been very difficult for the Seattle Kraken. I don't know about you, but it's been difficult to watch as well. And not because, listen, I'm not embarrassed by my team. I get frustrated. I get disappointed. I think that they don't play to their potential, but I'm always going to represent the Seattle Kraken. It's not about that. It's more so that you just see that it's like the air is slowly just dissipating, the energy, the fight, the spirit of the team. And to hear Dave talk about that, I was again, I just thought he was very frank with media today. And I think that comes from, this is me just kind of putting some things together, but we talked about how the team isn't really talking much. They don't want to have these, long speeches after these losses. Sometimes you have to feel it. Sometimes you have to just live through the loss and come out on the other side of the rubble. And I think that's where we are with the Seattle Kraken right now. I think that they are accepting what has happened and knowing that they didn't want it to happen for sure. I think we can all agree that we don't want to be in this situation, especially as Dave said, when 10 days ago they were in a much different situation. But as it stands right now, the Seattle Kraken are 6th in the wild card race. We're only 1 point behind the Calgary Flames, so we could bounce back there. But we're 8 points behind Minnesota, who's in the 4th spot. We're 9 points we're 10 points behind St. Louis. We are another 14 points behind the Vegas Golden Knights, who's in that second wildcard spot. That wasn't what was happening. And obviously Vegas wasn't in a wild card spot. We've talked about that as well. So some of this is just there's jockeying for position in the Western Conference overall. So knowing that today is our last matchup between an Eastern Conference opponent, that means all the more reason that there's going to be pressure on this Seattle Kraken team to win in regulation. And if they're going to lose and get that extra overtime point. You have to get points the rest of the way. You really have to. So it's Montreal tonight, then it's Anaheim 2 times, and then Dallas. And Dallas is one of those teams that we see, in the mix in the Western Conference. They're 2nd overall right now in the Central Division. So that's going to be a tough opponent and also a little bit charged. We know how things ended with us in Dallas last year. And, there should be a little pride, but I said that when we were playing Vegas and it didn't quite bubble over. So we're going to take a small little break here again on Locked On Kraken and then come back with some more comments from Dave because he just had some amazing insight and a little funny anecdote. I said it already on the show, but yeah, he actually gave us the starter. He admitted it. So I don't know what the Montreal media did to hoax that out of Dave, but it was a fun little exchange at the end of the press conference. So we'll hear that also. And then we do have some good news. And it comes from our AHL affiliate. So regardless of what happens with the Seattle Kraken, my friends, we will have playoff hockey to talk about on Locked On Kraken. And as you know, I've been also covering the Kansas City Mavericks. We'll talk about that on tomorrow's episode for a Kansas City Mavericks Monday. But let's just say there's definitely going to be some playoff hockey talk on Locked On Kraken. All that coming up on today's episode of Locked On Kraken. All right. Thanks as always for making Locked On Kraken a part of your daily destination. If you missed yesterday's episode or Friday's episode of Locked On Kraken, as well as Friday's episode of Locked On NHL, the Women's Hockey Spotlight, then you missed me ranting about tanking. You also missed me talking about the gold plan and how I have a little bit of a conspiracy theory, although it's really more just putting some dots together that maybe women's hockey is serving as an experimentation ground for the gold plan or other ideas on how to make hockey continually competitive. And again, I had a comment on YouTube that I thought was very thorough and really added some complexity to even my own thoughts. So we'll talk about that, I'm sure, as we find out whether the Seattle Kraken actually have a chance. And really it's just a matter of if they are going to play a little bit better. But again, I want to take you to Dave because a little bit of the difficulties of playing, of being in a Seattle Kraken uniform. Oh gosh. And we're wearing are we wearing Winter Classic again tonight? I think so. Not a fan. That's like those reverse retros as a 2-year team. Anyway, that's a whole nother rant for a whole nother day, but just prepare yourselves. I think it's retros. Anyway, yeah, so let's go back to Dave before I really get my panties in a bunch over those freaking retros, man. Should have put it back in the vault after January 1. Anyway, here's Dave talking about more significant challenges other than the retro or the Winter Classic jerseys that has been plaguing his locker room.
So here we are 10 days later, after really, feeling strongly and confidently about our ability to push for a playoff position. Now we have to turn our focus to the importance of these games, the importance to these games for the progress of our franchise, as your question alludes to and asks about, the importance of it to continuing the foundation that's been built, which is significant, and the importance of these games, for each individual in our room.
The foundation, is that more of a cultural thing? Is that building a culture of winning?
Well, you can use whatever tag word you want. I mean, we're building, right? We're building. And, in a perfect world, that would be a continual upward trajectory. There would be no bumps in the road. Typically, I think if you look at history, that's probably not the most common pathway. So as difficult as it is to get through, that's why these games are so important. And that's why the outcome of these games and the performance in these games is so important. Though it's jagged, you got to make sure that you keep pushing forward in a positive direction. Our guys have dug in. We had a real tough outing here against Buffalo. That was a day that we didn't react very well. We didn't handle our game day very well and the situation very well. Our guys have taken a lot of pride after that in making sure that our compete level, our work ethic, our detail is at a level that gives us and puts us in a position to win a hockey game, and that's what we expect here tonight. I'm not. You know what? Today I'll confirm it for you. Drew Bauer's in that. There you go.
Thanks, Coach. You know how important
All right.
it is in Montreal.
There we go. Okay. I don't get it, but if it's that important, we'll confirm it just for you guys. That's fair.
And I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Okay.
All right. Well, ended on, a fun and jovial note, but there were so many things that I heard in what Dave said. And again, I only gave you a taste. That was about 4 minutes, and I broke it up into 2 segments for you. That was about 4 minutes of 9 minutes of Dave speaking. But I wanted to give you that last piece because is it just me? Or was Dave, in his very Dave Haxtell way, addressing tanking? I'm going to say it again. Was Dave Haxtell addressing tanking? I thought he did it in a very... He's so dapper. He's just like oh, hello, my curls are acting a little crazy. Sorry if you're watching on YouTube because I got to fix my curls. This alfalfa curl right here is getting crazy. Anyway, I'm going to leave it alone. He's so dapper. He's got a very professional approach. It's as upstanding as his posture. Jokes aside, what I heard him say is effectively that this team knows that the playoff picture is very meek, that it's not looking good. Even if they're not officially mathematically eliminated, it's not looking good. So the focus has to be on building up what the franchise needs as individual players, as a collective, and building towards the future. And so that goes back to what I talked about in the first segment. Looking at a Matty Beniers, looking at a Riker Evans, looking at even a Joey Decord, who I've been talking about, and I think he's had a tough go of it lately, as has the Seattle Kraken. And you have to instill the confidence. You have to also adequately challenge those young players so that they're thinking situationally. This is the prime time to do it. So we don't need to be tanking. We can be experimental. Does that mean we might lose some games? Yes. But we read the comment from one of our Locked On insiders. What was that, Friday's episode or Saturday's episode? Losing the same way we've been losing the last handful of games is going to be disappointing. Losing is going to be disappointing, period. But it almost seems inevitable. I should say losing out on the playoffs almost seems inevitable. But you can go out with a fight. You can play with pride. And if you're smart, and it sounds like Coach Hack is thinking about this, you set your team up to challenge them in game situations, particularly some of the young guys, particularly some of the guys that maybe will be playing a different role. I mean, we've seen what McCann has been doing. You take this opportunity, you take the lemons and you make lemonade. Because if you waste the next few games on tanking, It doesn't matter if Wayne Gretzky Jr., like 5x times whoever you think is the best hockey player, if you're not building a foundation, it is worthless. It is worthless. And from those comments, at least, it seems to me like Dave knows that. And so I know a lot of people are talking about Dave Haxtell is done, and he might be. I don't follow all of the other 31 teams, obviously, as closely as I follow the Seattle Kraken. But I understand leadership. I talk about it a lot. That's why I love Allison Lucan's work when she brings analysis and data analytics and storytelling into conversations about leadership, because, those are the things that people think are like, I don't know, that nobody wants to talk about, but they're critically important. When we say things like plays the game. Anyway, I'm going to go on another tangent. Let me bring it back. I believe that Dave understands the importance of leadership, of building character, and in doing it in a way where, as he said, you might not be in the most comfortable situation, but you're a fool. I'm paraphrasing and reading between the lines of what he said. You're a fool if because you're not where you want to be, you let up on the gas and you miss an opportunity to get better, even when you're at the bottom, even when you're in the mud, even when you are in the thick of a situation that maybe it was self-inflicted, because I do think this is a self-inflicted situation for the Seattle Kraken. But even then, you can sulk or you can tank, and you can do all of these things to blame this and say this person should be fired and that guy should be traded. And of course, we talk about that on Locked On Kraken. But I'm very curious, especially now that the Seattle Kraken are home, like I said, for the next 4 games. I'm very curious to see how the Seattle Kraken use this time. I'm actually excited. I'm like Kobe Bryant when he used to say that he would get excited about rehab. I had never heard any athlete say that. I was not a big Kobe Bryant fan. It's one of those things that is unfortunate that I learned a lot more about his philosophy and psychology after he passed away. But one of the things that I loved learning about Kobe is that not only would he say things like, I love rehab, that is like one of my favorite parts of the process, but he would tell young people, I'm talking Katie Lou Samuelson, Sabrina Ionescu, young talent. You need to love the process of coming back, of being able to make yourself stronger than before, and maybe even stronger in a variety of ways that you didn't even have in your repertoire before. So not just like physically, like Hulk it up strong, but mentally strong. Whoa. The Mamba mentality is something people say, but I don't think they give enough credit to the process. I want us to go full Mamba mentality for the rest of the season, starting with Montreal. And if you focus on that, it's inevitable. It's inevitable that you will get results, maybe even beyond what was a part of your wildest dream. But you have to not only trust the process, but you have to follow through on the process. Woo! All right. I'm talking to myself now too here, Kraken fans. But with that, I'm going to get you going. We've got a game day. You've got pregame, of course, with our crew. And I want you to get your snackies, or maybe you're heading over to CPA, whatever the case is. Thanks as always for spending some time with me on Locked On Kraken. We'll talk a little bit about the Kansas City Mavericks, and I didn't even get to the Firebirds. Spoiler alert, too long, didn't read. They did clinch. We'll talk about it a little bit more in the days to come. Be kind to yourselves. Be kind to one another. And loud and proud, we say tonight, especially for those heading to CPA Climate Pledge Arena, let's go Kraken. I'll catch you on the next episode. Peace out, everybody.